Now imagine living in one of the world's wealthiest countries, yet you can't afford a roof over your head. Canada's housing crisis has been steadily tightening its grip. Rents in Toronto and Vancouver have climbed by double digits, vacancies are scarce, and many young families have given up on ever owning a home. This isn't a story about some far-off disaster, it's about today, here, in a country celebrated for its prosperity. The central conflict is clear. Supply hasn't kept up with the population growth or wage stagnation. In 2024, Canada completed around 260,000 new homes, but experts estimate that at least 400,000 units per year is needed to keep prices from rising. That's where Mark Carney comes in, a former central banker, now Canada's Prime Minister. He stands behind the microphone promising to double housing completion to 500,000 units annually. He pledges to fix the housing crisis by building faster, cheaper, and greener homes. Carney's plan hinges on something called Build Canada Homes, or referenced as BC. This new Crown Corporation, capitalized with $13 billion, will partner with provinces, municipality, Indigenous communities, and private builders. BCH aims to remove land costs by using federal sites and to deploy modern prefab technology to slash construction time and costs. Now, before we look forward, we need to look back. In the 1970s, Canada's Federal Housing Agency built and financed tens of thousands of affordable units. In 1976, more than 273,000 homes were started, roughly half of which enjoyed some sort of public funding. But the federal government withdrew in the late 1980s and early 1990s, shifting responsibility to provinces and slashing funds for non-market housing. That retreat left a gap. We stopped building for the people who needed it most. Canada's housing stock shrunk while the population kept growing. By the mid-1990s, federally funded affordable housing projects dropped to fewer than 5,000 units a year. Today, CMHC runs just a handful of regional offices. So Carney's promise to get Canada back in the business of building is both bold and nostalgic. Can BCH rekindle the lost capacity and deliver homes at a scale that we haven't seen in half a century? BCH's first target includes building 4,000 factory-built homes on federal land with a total capacity of 45,000 units, creating a $1.5 billion rental protection fund, investing $1 billion in transitional and supportive housing, and partnering with Nunavut to build more than 700 homes. This isn't just a blueprint. It's a multi-pronged intervention aimed at renters, nonprofit builders, and remote communities. Prefab isn't just a gimmick. Carney's team estimates that factory-built homes and modular construction can cut building timelines by 50%, cut costs by 20%, and emissions by 20% as well. For the country facing both housing shortage and climate crisis, this is appealing. Yet there is an elephant in the room: the labor shortage in trades, the risk of bureaucratic delays, and the question of whether the BCH will genuinely serve the most vulnerable. And these are topics we're going to explore next. We've seen bold promises before. Will this one be any different? Now that we understand the promise of Build Canada Homes, let's dive into how it's supposed to work and what stands in the way. BCH is capitalized with $13 billion, will unlock federal land, and is expected to partner with provinces and municipal governments, Indigenous communities, and private developers. On paper, this agency is a developer, financier, and catalyst for a new housing industry. Its mission is to provide land and capital, ensure projects use modern manufacturing methods, and then sell or manage the homes once they're built. Think of it as Canada's largest home builder that doesn't actually swing hammers. BCH rests on three pillars. 1, partnerships across governments and communities. 2, capital and technology deployment with a focus on modular and mass timber construction. And 3, a Buy Canadian policy that sources material. Modular methods are the key because they can cut build times by 50%, cost by 20%, and emissions by 20%. BCH will provide $25 billion in debt financing and $1 billion in equity financing for prefab manufacturers. This is meant to spark a new industry, to build factories, train workers, and to issue bulk orders that make modular construction viable. BCH also offers $10 billion in low-cost loans, $4 billion for long-term fixed-rate financing for affordable builders, and $6 billion targeted at deeply affordable and supportive housing. The first batch of projects include 4,000 factory-built homes on federal land with capacity for 45,000 units, a $1.5 billion fund to protect existing rentals by helping nonprofits purchase aging buildings, $1 billion for transitional and supportive housing, and a 700-unit partnership in Nunavut. These initiatives are designed to hit different pain points: shortage in new units, loss of existing rental stock, homelessness, and remote community needs. The plan also cuts GST on new home construction, halves municipal development fees, saving about $40,000 per two-bedroom apartment, revives the MURB tax allowance for investors in rental buildings, and speeds up approvals by using pre-approved building designs and modernized code. These measures aim to reduce costs and red tape, making it more attractive for builders to put shovels in the ground. But prefabrication isn't a silver bullet. Experts caution that factory-built housing in Canada faces obstacles such as country's boom and bust housing cycle, high capital costs for factories, and geographical discrepancies. Industry executives note that modular construction often isn't cheaper, it's only faster, and labor shortages compound the challenge. Canada's construction industry has been struggling to find skilled trade workers for decades. Many tradespeople are retiring and fewer young people are entering the trades, while new methods like modular construction require specialized training. BCH can throw money at factory production, but there just isn't enough carpenters, electricians, and plumbers. Those units won't get connected and finished on site. Bureaucratic delays and public-private misalignment pose another obstacle. Government involvement often leads to complicated coordination, multiple approvals, and risk of cost overruns. Private developers prioritize profit, sometimes at odds with affordability. When public money mixes with private interests, who ensures that homes remain affordable after the ribbon cutting? Critics say that BCH misdiagnosed the problem. The Hub argues that high immigration and restrictive zoning policies are the root cause. If cities don't allow denser development or duplexes in single-family neighborhoods, federal subsidies will barely move the needle. A national developer could even reduce municipality incentives by reform zoning laws. Ideological critics from Canadian Dimension argue that Build Canada Homes masquerades as a World War II-style solution, but it's fundamentally market-oriented. Wartime Housing Limited built, owned, and managed homes, renting them at cost. BCH, however, finances projects that private developers will sell on the open market, with no guarantee that they will remain affordable. This raises fears of speculators scooping up federally funded homes to flip for profit. The Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness supports BCH, but insists it needs to clear definition of affordability. They argue that affordability should mean housing costs are below 30% of pre-taxed income, not 80% of the market rents. Mixing supportive, deeply affordable, and modern income housing under one affordable umbrella is misleading. CAEH also calls the BCH to focus on those in greatest need. They urge the government to prioritize supportive housing, transitional housing, and by Indigenous for Indigenous projects. They advocate for a 20% target for Indigenous-led housing and at least 50,000 new supportive housing units. Supportive housing costs about $4,000 per month, cheaper than keeping someone in shelter, which is approximately $7,000, or even in a hospital at $30,000. CAEH also stresses the need for national housing agreements. The federal government must negotiate with provinces and territories to establish a shared vision and clear goal. Without consideration, projects could become mired in jurisdiction dispute or see some provinces opt out, undermining the national goal. Many governments use a threshold of 80% of the market rents to define affordability, but that still leaves low-income households paying half of their income on housing. CAEH suggests using a benchmark of 30% of pre-tax income. So how we define affordability determines on who benefits and who continues to struggle. Now, I will acknowledge that Carney's plan has raised expectations. For some, BCH signals hope, a bold federal role after decades of retreat. For others, it's another program that will overpromise and underdeliver. Economists at TD say reaching 5,000 completions per year may not necessarily restore affordability, but hitting even 400,000 will restore 16% increase in the construction workforce. To illustrate the stakes, imagine a factory built to turn out 10,000 modular homes annually. If municipal zoning still forbids multifamily buildings in neighborhoods where those homes are most needed, how many will actually get built? And if investors can scoop them up for short-term rentals, will rents really fall? History teaches us that post-war housing crises were solved through large-scale public investment and rent controls. Governments built, owned, and managed non-market housing. And we are repeating the same mistake by expecting the private sector to solve a public crisis. None of this means that the BCH is doomed to fail. It means housing policy is complex. There is potential synergy between modular technology, public land, and long-term financing to support housing goals. Complexity is no excuse for inertia. I invite you all to think like policymakers. If you had billions to spend, would you prioritize speed, affordability, or equity? Although Carney's plan has critics, it also has supporters who see it as the most ambitious federal housing initiative since World War II. Build Canada Homes could catalyze a new industry, slash construction times, and deliver thousands of homes. Or it could become another cautionary tale of misaligned incentives and missed opportunity. So we've seen the promise and the problems. Now let's talk about what needs to happen if Build Canada Homes is going to change the trajectory of the housing crisis. This isn't about money or technology, it's about systems, people, and political will. First, we need a clear definition on affordability. As CAEH reminds us, affordability isn't 80% of the market rents. It's housing that costs no more than 30% of a household's pre-taxed income. Without this standard, new units may be labeled affordable while remaining out of reach for lower income families. Next, we need to invest in people as much as in the projects. Canada should adopt a national strategy to train thousands of tradespeople, carpenters, electricians, plumbers. Building 500,000 homes would require the construction workforce to expand by 16%. If we don't have the hands, it doesn't matter how many factories we build. Federal, provincial, territory collaboration is essential. Jurisdictional wrangling will slow or derail projects. Regular meetings, shared funding formulas, and accountability mechanisms are needed so provinces and municipalities can align zoning, infrastructure, and services with the BCH's goal. Zoning reform and municipal leadership are also critical. Critics argue that without land use liberation, federal spending will get stuck in planning departments. Cities need to legalize gentle density, multiplexes, laneway homes, and mid-rise buildings to accommodate for the homes BCH hopes to finance. Examples from cities that have reformed zoning show faster construction and more affordable units. We must also empower by Indigenous for Indigenous housing. CAEH urges 20% target for Indigenous-led projects and co-designing programs for Indigenous provinces. These communities face unique housing challenges, crowded homes, mold, and infrastructure gaps. Empowering Indigenous organizations ensure housing is culturally appropriate and benefits stay in the communities. Supportive housing is the cornerstone for reducing homelessness. CAEH calls for at least 50,000 new supportive units, noting that supportive housing costs $4,000 per month compared to $7,000 for a shelter or $30,000 in hospital stays. Supportive housing isn't just about building, it includes wraparound services that address mental health, addiction, and unemployment. Protecting existing rental stock is another priority. $1.5 billion rental protection fund aims to help nonprofit purchases apartment buildings at risk of being converted into condominiums, strengthening tenant protection and supporting co-op conversions to ensure communities have long-term control over affordability. We must also remember the promise of prefabrication. Mass timber and modular techniques could unlock productivity gains if scaled properly. But to deliver on that promise, Canada will need not only factories, but also supply chain resilience, stable timber supplies, standardized design, and robust inspection regimes. Finally, we should reconsider the role of government ownership. Historical examples show that public housing owned by provinces remain affordable. Some of the BCH projects should stay in public hands rather than being sold to the open market. Public and nonprofit ownership ensures permanent affordability and shields homes from speculation. Housing policy isn't something that happens in a vacuum. It's shaped by the choices we make at the voting booth, at council meetings, and in our community. Support nonprofit builders, advocate for zoning reforms, and hold politicians accountable. Mark Carney's plan isn't a bold attempt to reclaim federal government's role in building homes. Its success won't hinge solely on modular homes and money. It will depend on whether we define affordability wisely, train generational builders, and act collectively to ensure housing is a right, not a commodity. The story of Build Canada Homes is still being written. Let's stay engaged and make sure it ends with everyone under a roof that they can afford.